At the age of 6, Kelli Copter was branded a suppressive person by her parents and the Church of Scientology and given the option to either go to boarding school, be adopted, or join the elite Sea organisation. Kelli's story is fascinating and offers a unique insight into what it was like growing up in Scientology here in the UK and what her recovery process has been like and how Scientology still affects her today over a decade later. I hope you find this conversation interesting and insightful. Please do get involved in the comments down below and hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Hi Kelli, welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me. It's good to see you.
Hello, it's good to see you too. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Another fellow Brit. You're actually the second British Scientologist or former Scientologist I've had on my channel. So welcome. It's interesting to hear another UK perspective and UK story from inside Scientology.
I'm honoured. Thank you very much. I think what you're doing is really, really good. Sharing this side of the Atlantic's kind of view on it. So fair play to you. Fair play.
Thank you. And likewise, I mean, for those of you who haven't seen it already, Kelli Copter has done an amazing series on Scientology. It's, what is it, 6 episodes? Is that right? Do you want to maybe explain a little bit about what you've done with your YouTube channel and how it all came about and that sort of stuff? Because it's a really great series. I think everyone should go and watch it.
Thank you. So I've had a YouTube channel before the Scientology stuff. I was just uploading stuff in lockdown. I was bored, so that's kind of where the channel has come from. But I have grown up in Scientology and I had not been in contact with my family who are in Scientology for about 10 years. I'd been kicked out when I was 16 years old. And during the lockdown, my dad got in touch with me. And we then got into the sort of weeds of it with about, talking about Scientology. And I had some questions kind of about my own childhood and things too. And through kind of learning about it with him and doing my own research, I was like, okay, I really want to put something together that can kind of be helpful for someone that was like me as a child, growing up in that environment, or somebody that wanted to kind of have an overview of what it's all about. So it's 6 parts. The first part is me explaining my own experience growing up in that. And then the rest of them is kind of a journey on, what the courses are like, how much money it's going to cost you, all of the abuses or alleged abuses, if we can't say it, and all of those reports and things that have happened as well. I've tried to compile into a sort of comprehensive series to show you what it's all about, really.
Sure. I think it's a really good introduction as well to Scientology, because for those of you who didn't grow up in Scientology or haven't been involved, it's a really good way of explaining kind of everything in a nutshell of what Scientology is and the beliefs and the practices. And it's really well produced as well. I mean, you did a really good job of stitching it together and editing it, and it looks top quality. So well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I learned how to edit in lockdown. Most people don't know it, but the first 4 episodes, they're literally filmed on my phone. I've just lit it really well.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And then I taught myself how to edit. I was like, I'm going to make this as good as I can. So I learned a lot about that as well with doing it in production and stuff. So and it made it fun and kind of creative, because a lot of it is very dark, very scary and sad. So you have to pull the joy from it from somewhere, right?
Yeah, and it's important to laugh about things when talking about such serious stuff. I think that's one thing I've learned a lot about this community of former Scientologists is, it's really heavy, dark, and important stuff that we talk about, but you have to find the humor in it, because there are some things that when you leave and look back on it, you kind of think, that is kind of funny at how bizarre it is, or how crazy this thing is, or how mad it is. You always find something, you look at it and go, talking about different things you do in Scientology, and you go, hold on a second, out of context, that's actually quite funny that I did that. So you have to find the humor in it, because otherwise you end up being bogged down, I think, too much. But do you want to start maybe by giving people, I know you've told your story already in your series and on Aaron Smith Levin's channel, but just for those of you who don't know, do you want to maybe give it in a nutshell, a bit of an explainer of who you are, what your journey in Scientology was like, and where we're at now, and then we can delve in a bit deeper, if that's cool.
Yeah, sure. So I was born into Scientology. My parents were in it already. They worked on staff in Manchester Org, and they eventually became public members. But with me, when I was around sort of 6 years old, they were struggling in Scientology. They were having some problems, not getting the wins or the gains that they sort of were promised. And in discussion with the people in the church, they look for kind of a source of trouble, or somebody that might be causing you to have problems. And that person was me. So I was 6 years old at this time, and they pulled me in for a security check, which is where you're put onto an e-meter and asked a list of questions. They actually have a specific list for children between the ages of 6 and 12. And after that, they decided that I was a problem. They informed my parents that I was a suppressive person and that they needed to handle me or disconnect from me. That could have been affected in a few ways. It could have been adoption, my parents discussed, boarding school, or of course there was the option of the Sea Org as well. So that's kind of where we started. And this sort of process of handling was the other option they could do, which was a lot of e-meter auditing, lots of OW write-ups, where I had to write down all my crimes and confess them. And this would happen for like a good number of years. They eventually left Scientology when I was about 14 years old. And 2 years later, they actually kicked me out and acted upon the disconnection, I guess. And I hadn't been in contact with either of them since, until during the lockdown, where my dad actually reached out to me. Still not heard anything from my mum. And yeah, that, it brings us kind of up to date. That was a short version, but,
I think it's just mad to me to think that, I mean, it's not something that I've heard of happening before, but it's absolutely something that I could, can see happening. It's I'm surprised I haven't heard of this sort of story before, where parents just find their children as a suppressive person and just like it does sound crazy and it is wild, but it's totally something that Scientology scripture allows to happen. And it's just mad to think that as a 6-year-old, your parents kind of decided and the church decided that you were the problem. It's like, how, you're a child, right? You don't, you're still growing up and learning things.
During that sec check, I think I must have laughed or something. When they ask you, like, are you a communist, or have you made a planet radioactive? Like, I would just be like, what the heck, and I'm sure my needle went crazy.
Yeah. Are you a government agent? Are you trying to infiltrate Scientology? Like, I'm a child. I'm 6 years old. No, of course not.
Yeah, literally.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah, it was very, very strange to do that. We had an e-meter at home as well. I hated that thing so much. I dreaded going on it, because I would know that if we were going to have an argument, then it would end up with me on that e-meter as a way to deal with it. And it's my perspective on it is a bit different, I think, because I wasn't doing courses or going up the bridge or in the Sea Org or on staff, but my parents were studying it. So those policies that are in Scientology were implemented into my life at home. So when I hear stories from like stories from people in the hole and things and how they had to do that, I relate to it, because I'm like, I literally had to do these things in a similar way, and I know it's because of the policies. It's following L. Ron Hubbard's policy to the letter, because Scientologists believe it's the way to live. Like,
yeah, I think this is one thing that people should kind of realize and understand as well is, you hear about Scientology ethics and policies and communication skills and all the courses that you do in Scientology and so on. A model, like, ideal Scientologist is not someone that goes into the church and applies the stuff there. The idea of Scientology is you can apply it in your life in every way, shape, or form. So a model Scientologist would be applying ethics in this kind of way in their home to their children. There would be an equivalent of the RPF, or like some sort of lower conditions ethics treatment to children who perhaps haven't done their homework or something, or they've been naughty or whatever. There's going to be ethics applied by the parents in the home as well, which is mad when you really start thinking about what that actually means. And I wanted to delve into that with you a little bit, of how your family and home life looked with Scientology ethics not being applied by the church, but actually being applied by your parents, right? Did you ever have any lower ethics conditions? Or I know you mentioned you were on the meter. Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so if these things would kind of happen in sort of cycles, I guess. So we'll start with a problem, some issue. It could be my parents were having arguments, or their business was failing, or they weren't doing well in Scientology, or something like that. And then that source of trouble would be identified as me, and I would be sort of asked to, confess my crimes. Now, I would be like isolated first. I'd be moved away from all my family, and it not as in a different location. I just wouldn't be allowed to see them. I wouldn't, if I, like, say I'm in my bedroom or something and I wanted to get a drink of water, I would go downstairs to get one. No one's allowed to look at me. No one's allowed to talk to me. And this would go for weeks and weeks on end, because of my, sort of degraded nature in their eyes.
And how old were you at this point? This is when you were 6, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it happening when I was 6, and it happened all the way up until I left, really. So, this, I call it being freezed out. I don't know if there's a word for it, but it was really hard to deal with, just being kind of completely blanked from everyone. Even my little brothers, they would be told that they're not to talk to me, not to look at me, not to acknowledge that I was there, which was really, really tricky. But I'd be isolated and have to come up with a list of my crimes. And I didn't know at all what I was supposed to be writing on this. I was like, what crimes have I done? Like, and I would put things down, like if I thought something bad about somebody at school, I was like, I thought this teacher was
Excuse me.
really mean, or I said that this lesson was boring today. Like I would put things down that I was just thinking, like, and it did really make me feel like I was not allowed to have like a private thought ever. It was like I confessed anything that I thought that was unkind or bad or anything like that. And I would try and like fill the page with whatever to make it look good enough, like, here's my list. And then I would bring that in and then go onto the e-meter, and it would be a sort of case of, okay, let's talk about this, let's go through the incident over and over again. They lasted for hours. And for me, often it was at really, really late at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. I could be woken up and dragged out of bed and taken down to have an audit session. Usually that was because my parents will have had an argument and then come to the conclusion that it was my fault and they needed to handle it immediately. So I would have no idea what was going on and kind of be dragged into this. And yeah, these sessions would go on for hours, and I had to admit that my real intentions were to destroy their marriage, to cause fights with my brothers, make sure their business failed, and to attack Scientology and cause harm to my family, basically. Sorry, I know
Horrible.
it's a lot.
No, it's horrible. I think it's just it's firstly a horrible thing to put a child through,
Yeah.
but also it's a horrible thing to use a child as a scapegoat, right? And I think there's two things at play here. There's Scientology allowing that to happen, and obviously Scientology is going to have a hand in, you know, helping these people locate and decide that you're the cause of the problem. And then you've got the people doing it, the parents, and how, you know, obviously I don't know your parents and I can't speak for them. So I, you know, and I'm not a therapist or anything, but it is really easy when you're in that headspace of Scientology being the answer to get wound up in kind of a really weird headspace of thinking. And when Scientology suggests that, you know, you might be the cause of the problem, you're not going to think twice and you're not going to question it. And you're just going to go along with it. Right. And once you do that, you do become quite militant in the way that you apply Scientology, and it almost disassociates yourself from your emotions and feelings with your family. So your parents probably weren't even considering, when they're waking you up in the middle of the night to interrogate you on the e-meter in a, you know, auditing session, they're probably not even thinking, is this the best thing to do, to go and wake up our child when in the middle of the night when she's sleeping? And they're probably not even thinking that. They're probably just thinking, we need to handle this. Scientology is the way to do it. And it doesn't matter if we wake her up because we need to do this now. And it's just horrible that Scientology can get people into that headspace that therefore they have no regard for other people and
Yeah.
their emotions, right?
Yeah. And I think as well, like when my dad worked in the org, like his job was to like read people's knowledge reports and kind of get enact the ethics bit
I was
of
going to
that.
ask, what was his post in at Manchester org?
Yeah,
Do
I
you
don't
know?
know if he was I don't know what they would call it. I actually don't know the names of all of the positions and
But
things.
in ethics, he would have been in HCO, like the Hub of Communication Office, doing ethics stuff, right?
I
That's what
think
I
so,
gather.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so he had to kind of dish that out. He has really good knowledge of these lower conditions,
Sure.
you know, and he told me like when people were on them, you know, they'd all be dressed in like boiler suits, and that people would look down on them, including him, like that they were like degraded people or something. Degraded beings, sorry, is probably the correct term for that.
Yeah.
You know, and I was subject to that in my own home. So I would have been I was tasked with lots of menial labor as a way to make amends for my actions. So yeah, I was tasked with a lot of that, and then it was sort of like if I had been quiet and I'd done all my chores and everything, you know, maybe I'd be allowed to eat with my family that night. Maybe I'd be allowed to watch a movie with them. You know, and sometimes they would be like, you know, we see that you've changed, and you know, you can maybe be a part of this family again. It would never last, you know, and it was that I was just this out ethics suppressive person trying to hurt them, which was not the case at all. So
And that's one of the reasons when you were talking earlier about the options of, you know, sending you to boarding school or,
yeah,
you know, adoption or whatever. It's really interesting you say that the Sea Org was one of the options, because the purpose of the Sea Org isn't necessarily to spread the word of Scientology or promote Scientology. The actual purpose of the Sea Org, when you join, is to get ethics in on the planet, right? That's the actual purpose of what the Sea Org
wow,
do. You sign a 1 billion year contract, dedicate your life and all future lives to Scientology. But actually, your goal and your mission and the reason you're doing it is because your purpose is to get ethics in on the planet. the idea is that the SEAL will come in, get ethics in, so everyone is following Scientology's ethics and everyone's kind of doing things in the right way, and there's no crime and all of this other stuff that ethics supposedly cures. And then once everyone's got their ethics in, then you can go about really getting, you know, Scientology implemented and getting people up the bridge and so on. So the idea is getting ethics in is the first step in clearing the planet. So that's what the Sea Org are meant to be doing. So when you talk about you being out ethics and you being a potential suppressive person and your family wanting to push you away because of that, it seems wild to me that they believed you would qualify for the Sea Org, because if you're a suppressive person, you haven't got your ethics in, you're not going to qualify. They're not going to accept you into the Sea Org because you haven't got your ethics in. So I wonder, it's just an interesting thing that they wanted to, maybe they were hoping that by shipping you off to the Sea Org and doing your EPF, which is the first thing you do when you join the Sea Org, your training and that sort of thing, maybe they were hoping that would kind of like, you know, put you into place and train you up and kind of get you in that
SEALG, the SEALG was not their suggestion.
Right.
I was approached to join the SEALG when I was 12 years old. They came, we had these, we had some OT8s come to our house. You know, my mum had requested them for some help. She was having some problems. Yeah, they came to our house, and my parents didn't actually know that they tried to recruit me to the Sea Org. They rocked up with this billion-year contract. One of them is outside with my mum, and the other one's inside with me. And yeah, they show me this contract, and they're like, yeah, you know, you're going to go to the Free Wind ship. You know, it's this fantastic cruise ship, and you know, you'll make your parents proud and all this kind of stuff. And at this time, I was like, I was 12. I was convinced I was going to be like a famous singer. So I was like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to be like a musician. So this is not for me. And then they literally was like, well, you know, we can get you into all the festivals. You can meet all the celebrities. Or they said anything to try and get me to sign that thing.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't. But I did. I told my dad about it, and he didn't know that they had asked me to join it. My parents' solutions were more of the boarding school, which I got threatened with a lot. Like, they would literally, if I was falling out with them, they'd hand me a brochure for another place that they found in some far away place, you know, or adoption.
Yeah. And you did end up going to boarding school, right? Although you ended up not boarding, you went to Greenfields, which is the Scientology school here in the UK. For those of you in America, it's kind of like Delphi, the Scientology school over there. It's the kind of UK equivalent that's just around the corner from St. Hill, the UK headquarters. And although you didn't board, you went as a day pupil. You did spend, what was it, 6 months at Greenfields, right?
Yeah, only 6 months.
Yeah.
Very different to my other schools. It was... I couldn't tell you like what we were learning. I'm sure we had to read some, you know, sort of study texts and things like that. Student hat, maybe some of the learning how to learn stuff. But, you know, most of what I remember there was doing word clearing, doing some menial labor, cleaning type things, not clapping for L. Ron Hubbard at the end of lessons and getting into trouble because of it. Like, that is what I really remember from the school. Yeah, and it was mixed, very mixed as well. There was kids of all ages there, so yeah, it was a weird time.
I think a really common misconception as well is that Greenfields and Delphi, they don't teach Scientology. Like, they don't make you go and do Scientology courses instead of learning English, math, science, and all that sort of stuff. The way Greenfields particularly works is it's an independent school, so they get around a lot of regulation from the government. There is an independent inspectorate that does inspect kind of independent schools and things like that, but it's a little bit different to the government and state-run schools. So they get away with a lot, but they do have to teach the same subjects. They have to teach English, science, and all of the other stuff. But they can do it in whatever way they want to, whereas a state-run school has to teach according to the curriculum that's set by the government and do it in a certain way. So Greenfields applies study technology. So they use L. Ron Hubbard's practices on how to learn in order to teach the subjects that they have to teach. And they have a really weird, flexible way of learning that they let you choose what subjects you want to learn. Is that right? I think I read this, that they don't kind of force you to do all of the subjects up until you leave school. You can kind of choose what lessons you're interested in and what subjects you want to learn and focus on those. So actually, I was reading a report the other day, Greenfields actually has a below average success rate in terms of grades because they let students pick and choose what they want to learn. They end up graduating school with less qualifications than the average person, and the grades aren't even that great. Like, they're not considered an amazing independent school. And considering they're forcing you to apply study technology, which is this learning how to learn stuff, you know, the evidence is very clear that L. Ron Hubbard study tech doesn't work because they're implementing it in the school and it's not working, right? But what was your experience like? Because from I remember wanting to go to Greenfields when I finished school, and I was kind of just left staff, and I wanted to do you know, sixth form A levels. So in the UK, for those of you who aren't based here, you finish school at 16, then you do 2 years that are optional of A levels of fewer subjects that prepare you for university at 18. So I wanted to go and do my A levels at Greenfields, and I remember looking into it and trying to get down there. And like, it was the best. I really, really wanted to go, and I ended up not going. I'm thankful I didn't,
Yeah.
because you know, the stories are crazy. But what was it like? You know, John, have you got any stories? Because I know that you said you went to St. Hill after finishing at school to study and stuff, right? That's what the kind of schedule was like. Is that right?
Yeah, so we were only at Greenfields because we moved close to St. Hill, so my parents could do their courses there. Yeah, so we went to St. Hill. I can understand why the grades are not great there, because it just I think it becomes convoluted with how they do stuff. So you'd be like, say you're doing English, you might be reading a story, and then it's then not about the story, it's about what you didn't understand about the story, or you know. And most of what I remember is being sat with the dictionary, just looking up words, you know, and the point of whatever we were doing is then no longer that important, you know. I think that also that's stuck with me, you know, throughout my life. I still to this day can't hear a word that I don't understand without having to know what it means. I don't get a dictionary out, but I will ask. I'll be like, what does that mean? Like, you know, because you're kind of made to feel like if you don't, what they call it, MU, is it? Is that the word
Yeah,
they use?
MU, misunderstood word. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, they're like, if you have this is going to give you an engram. And if you have an engram, you're going to get like ill. And, you know, so this like fear that if you don't get something all the way, then you're going to suffer for it, basically. Like, I still have that to this day. Like, if I don't understand something, I worry something bad will happen because I didn't get it.
Yeah, I think like L. Ron Hubbard's teaching is that if you go past a word that you don't understand, you're going to become disengaged with whatever it is you're reading. You're not going to fully grasp the concept of something. You know, there's also this idea of having mass when you're learning. So if you're learning a concept or a word or something, it's not just about reading the definition, it's about understanding the derivation, where it came from, all of the definitions in the dictionary, and being able to apply it. So you have to either be able to sketch it out or use clay to like make a demonstration to demonstrate the principle, you know, with little models, or using paper clips and stuff that you've just got to hand, little objects to kind of demonstrate, you know, this is this and this is this and that's what this means, you know, so that you have this full conceptual understanding of this word and what it means and how to
Yeah,
apply it. And if you don't follow that technique, you will not fully understand whatever it is you're studying, and you will end up in this sort of daze, and you won't understand, and you'll end up what's called blowing, which means that it's an unauthorized departure. So you will leave the course or leave Scientology because you're so confused, and you've not fully understood it. You're just in your head going, well, you know, fuck this, I'm done, I don't care anymore, and
yeah,
you leave. So they're terrified of this and they really apply it. But as you say, what ends up happening is you end up spending all your time. I remember spending hours looking up the definition of the word the and the definition of the word and there's like 25 definitions of these sort of small words, and you
Wow.
can't carry on with your study of the course until you've read and fully understand and demonstrated you understand all of these definitions of these
What would be the
tiny
clay
words.
representation of the word there? I'm
It's
wondering.
like L. Ron Hubbard has his own dictionary. What was it called? I think it was called like the Small Words Dictionary or the Tiny Words Dictionary or something, where he's basically written a dictionary of the different definitions of these commonly used 3 or 2 letter words,
Yeah.
and they've got like pictures of how it's kind of like a children's book. But I remember spending hours in that book and having to demonstrate. It was just mad. But similar to you, when I years later was, reading a book and I was yawning, I was like, oh my God, I'm yawning. This is great. And I don't have to look up the definition in a dictionary because I'm not in Scientology anymore, because there are symptoms of an MU, if you're yawning or you kind of don't look as interested in it anymore, then that means you've gone past the word you don't understand. So that's when you have to look it up in the dictionary. So these are things that hang on, years after you leave Scientology. So it's interesting that you had a similar sort of experience.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't. I literally used to hide it, and other kids did as well. Like it was clearly like everybody knew that if you were caught, like you would be looking up words. So you didn't want to be chatting to people or messing about or anything like that, or yawning, of course, because you'd be like clocked immediately, and have to do this. And it's boring. Like, let's be honest, it is boring to sit with a dictionary and look up 25 meanings of the word there. Like,
Yeah.
nobody wants to do that. So,
And was this applied at home as well with your family? You talked about them handing down ethics and things like this, and not necessarily wearing a boiler suit, but being looked down on the household. And,
yeah.
what was that kind of punishment and justice and ethics side of things like in the home as well?
Yeah, so it was obviously for the studying we did when we were homeschooled, we did that, the word clearing stuff, but the actual ethics, it was like I said, punishment for my evil SP intentions. And yeah, I was basically, and I also was never told like I had to do this for this amount of time. I just kind of had to figure it out. Like, you know, you need to figure out what you've done wrong. You need to figure out how to make it right again. Um, so I would literally be like trying to clean for them, try and do anything I could to make them happy. I was a good kid in my public schools. Like I didn't get into trouble. I got good grades. I wasn't like, because there could be the argument like, oh, were you like proper naughty and doing drugs and getting drunk and sneaking out? Like, no, I wasn't. I literally wasn't. So yeah, I would basically have to make these amends to them until they felt that I had really changed this time, and could be a part of the family again that wasn't going to cause them any trouble. So yeah, it was mostly the cleaning and stuff, then the e-meter sessions, and we obviously, if you're doing e-meter sessions, you're supposed to have your like TRs in to really take part in that properly, because from what I've learned about them since, they enable, in order to keep you in that room, they enable them to get you to repeat phrases over and over again and hold focus with somebody. So I would do those. I hated them so much. Like I didn't do all of them. I know there's like weird ones with Alice in Wonderland stuff and all of that. I only did the I think it's 1 and 3, maybe. I don't know. The first one was like staring. You have to sit very still and just stare at them. Like it's so awkward and hard. You
Yeah.
can't blink or look away or laugh. Like I'm quite a giggly person, even when it's really serious. I'm like,
Sure.
what's going on. So we had to do that for at least 2 hours. And this was over a period of time as well, so it wasn't just one day we decided to do training routines. Like, we were trained to do training routines. And then it was bull baiting as well. I think, is that TR3 or is it 2? I can't remember.
Yeah, so the TRs are this way of, there used to be a thing on the bridge called the TRs and objectives, right? Which is now called something different, but it used to be called TRs objectives, and it's part of the process you go, going up the bridge to total freedom. It's now part of the SRD, which is something different, but it's still the same sort of principle. And the idea is that it helps you confront things, right? So when you hear these stories of you have to sit in a room sat opposite someone, not blinking and try not to fidget, that sounds pretty crazy, right? It sounds pretty wild. But in Scientology, you learn the idea behind it and why. And then suddenly it doesn't sound so crazy anymore, because the idea is that you're able to confront everything. You're in control of your environment, and therefore being able to sit there looking at somebody and not fidgeting and being in control of your physical body and reactions. You're in control of not fidgeting, not laughing, not falling asleep, whatever. That enables you to confront the environment you're in, confront another person, and be completely comfortable with anyone that's opposite you, right? Whether it be someone who is, someone someone you don't know, someone you have feelings for, doesn't matter. You can confront it and be there present without reacting. That's the idea behind it. And they kind of progress through different kind of ideas around the same concept. And bull baiting is this one where I remember doing lots of bull baiting about, you need to be able to confront any situation where someone is confronting you. So for example, the idea is if someone is shouting at you or is angry at you, or a drunk person in the street tries to come up to you and do something or whatever, instead of reacting and being upset or shouting or angry yourself, you're able to take it and be like, cool, I recognize this emotion this person is feeling, and react in an analytical way rather than using your reactive mind, so that you can process the information and behave in a rational way and come to a resolution. So the practice of bull baiting is you sit there and the other person has to get you to react in any way they possibly can, whether that's shouting at you, clapping in your face, or whatever it is. They've got to try and get you to react, and you keep doing it until you react. And when you do react, you start again, and you do hours and hours and hours of this, so that you train your mind to not react to different situations, which is very hypnotic in nature. But what was your experience like doing this? Because how old were you when you were doing this?
I would have been 8 years old when I was doing this.
Right.
And yeah, I hate the bull baiting thing. Similar thing to what you just said. I was told it would be about confronting bullies or people being unkind, things like that, which I actually didn't have an issue with. Like, I had some really good mates at school. I had a great time. It was easier than being at home. But yeah, so we would do that. And yeah, same thing, sat on chairs opposite. My mum did them on me, and would be looking for my buttons. Like, I can never hear anyone say the word flunk ever again, because it's just triggering. Like, I just hate it.
That's word that for those of you who don't know, flunk is the word you use when you're doing a TR or something and you do react. Say you're sat there and someone claps in your face and you
Flunk,
blink,
like,
you go flunk,
awful.
and that means you failed. You got to start again, right? And that's the word flunk that's used. So I totally get that, because I've not actually heard anyone use that word other than in Scientology. I know it is a word that is used elsewhere, but it's not like a commonly used word in the English dictionary.
Awful. It's so abrasive and just awful. I hate it. And yeah, the whole idea of it seems very twisted to me. Like, you're saying about being able to confront people and being able to analyze someone's emotion, but not being there to do it. You're like, be present in that yourself. You're not being reactive. but I feel like actually not being responsive is the truth. And you know, from how it makes people sort of suggestible to these nonsense statements, having to repeat phrases over and over again, it's putting people into a trance essentially. You know, which, and then you're supposed to access that state whilst you're in an auditing session. So one, you don't leave. Two, you know, it's 12 hours long. You're going to cover a lot of stuff. You're going to cover all of your past lives that may or may not have happened, you know. So I think like the purpose of it is so someone's controllable in that auditing session. I think it's really, really dangerous thing. It is hypnotism in its sort of basicest form, you know, which makes sense because we know L. Ron Hubbard was a hypnotist at one point in his life. So,
absolutely.
I
And what was the
hate them.
what was the like long-term impact for you? Because, you know, we think about recovery and, you know, it's very easy and quick to get your mind to stop thinking about certain principles or applying certain things, like, you know, not looking up using a dictionary every time you go past where you've
Yeah.
ever sat. Those are kind of easy things that you can kind of stop yourself from doing. But things like your TRs and ball baiting, those are things that go so deep in your brain that you're going to apply even when you don't realize it years later. You know, one of the big things I talk about in my recovery that I say in pretty much every interview I do is that this story of being in front of a friend and realizing when he was upset or angry that I was trying to change his emotion so that he wasn't angry anymore, so that we could then talk about whatever the problem was. And
Yeah.
that is a complete hang up from doing TRs, right? Because I'm trying to manipulate his emotions so that we can talk about it rationally, because you can't rationally deal with something if you're feeling some sort of emotion. Those are the sorts of things that stay in your brain for a really long period of time. I was just wondering if you're comfortable talking about recovery a little bit, like what that has been like for you and how it affects you today or, you know, over time, years after leaving.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I've got too many hang-ups with the training routines. I'm not very good in you know, like a shouting match or anything like that. I do kind of freeze up if someone yells at me because you know, I was taught to not respond to people shouting at me and stuff like. So I could do kind of freeze up with that still to this day. In terms of the other policies and things like that, if the thing I've struggled probably with the most is that if someone has like a problem or something, I immediately look for how it's my fault. You know, and being told you're like an evil, bad person. Like I always was like, am I like, you know, and I've had to deal with that kind of learning how to love myself and things again too, because I genuinely thought that, you know, I was not a good enough person to kind of be around people, have friends. You know, my own family didn't want me, so why would anybody else? Like, so yeah, I would say that's been something I've had to relearn how to do, and you know, it's a process. You still have to do it sometimes. So
Yeah, I think my heart definitely goes out to you, and I think I said it in your stream you did with Aaron Smith Levin. I said something along the lines of you're really brave for doing what you're doing, and I do really mean that, because everyone who's been through Scientology has an element of this, because in Scientology you're taught that you are a spiritual being with more control and power and
yeah,
ability than you can ever imagine. And so therefore you're responsible for everything that happens in your environment, which can be quite empowering to begin with. But when you end up being a victim of abuse or something, for example, well, it turns into, well, why did you put yourself in that situation? You know, why
pulled
did
it.
you allow that to happen? You've pulled it in. Exactly. So everyone in Scientology has this complex to some degree, because you are trained to believe that you've pulled it in.
Yeah,
But my heart goes out to you even more because, you know, I wasn't raised in Scientology. I joined of my own accord. Um, so I had a life before Scientology and now have a life after. Whereas with you, not only did you have that thing with Scientology and that, you know, pulling it in and the principle and all of that, but you had it applied literally at home by your parents, and you grew up with this thing. So it must hit even harder for you, and must have been an even more difficult journey to recover from, because not only do you have that belief that you've pulled it in, but also you've got your parents treating you like a degraded being, like you say. um it must have just been really hard to go through that process, and I just wonder what that journey was like for you. Did you go and seek therapy or counseling, or like what was it like when you finally did leave Scientology, I suppose?
Yeah, so they left when I was about 14. I was struggling with my mental health anyway. I was, a teenager as well. Like, let's not pretend being a teenager is easy. It's not, without Scientology or alcoholic parents or any of that stuff. It's hard anyway.
Yeah.
And I had been struggling with an eating disorder. I wasn't eating properly, and my school had kind of got in touch and recommended that I go for some therapy. I had never been to like doctors or a psychiatrist or anything. You taught to be quite afraid of those people, that they are the sort of enemy. It feels very us versus them when your family's in that. So I didn't see any of those people. I was quite scared to do it. And I had therapy, and I stayed in therapy for about 7 years. On and off. It wasn't 7 years straight, but I've had it for that period of time. And every time I've been back, it's maybe been for a different part of my sort of recovery, whether that's, being able to take care of myself, which I can obviously do that now, to dealing with the more emotional stuff of how I feel about myself, and how I, like who I believe I am and stuff, and I feel like I've come a long way. Like I've become more confident. Like, I've put some things out onto the internet, and just trying to own my own space and being like, no, like your voice is important, and what's you've got something to share here that could help people as well. So it's just been a long journey. I think you go through it for a while. There's still issues with my connection with my family and stuff, which is a constant source of struggle. But I have learned a lot about, how people treat each other and how people talk to each other outside of Scientology. I haven't got people always looking for my evil intentions and making sure my ethics are in. And, people are like, you're funny, we could be friends. And it's that simple, like, and I'm really, really lucky that I've been surrounded by just incredible people. So I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one thing that you touched on there is kind of learning about things is really important, and education as well. I don't know about you, but for me, education has been really important in my recovery, and learning not just more about Scientology and reading things like the OT levels that I never did when I was in Scientology, but education around how and why these things work. And the more I learn about other groups like the Moonies, the Mormons, and other sort of similar coercive control groups and cults and things, the more it puts Scientology into perspective, and the more I learn about my experience and how and why these things work. Like the TRs, like you're saying, are quite hypnotic in nature. I would never in a million years have thought that, because in Scientology, you're taught that hypnotism is this very primitive, someone dangling a thing in front of your face, and that kind of image that everyone has of hypnotism. And no one does that in Scientology. So therefore, Scientology isn't hypnotism. But then the more you learn about it, the more you realize, no, it very much is. And there was actually a time in early Dianetics and early Scientology where L. Ron Hubbard required auditors to read a book about hypnotism, because it is kind of this state of reverie, which is what you go in and is talked about in the original Dianetics book. It is a hypnotic trance state, and it is there in his own words, but you don't think of it in that way in Scientology. But understanding it and learning about it now being out of Scientology has helped me come to terms with it a lot in my brain and being like, oh, okay, I get it now, because actually it's this. Have you had any experiences like that with education and learning about what happened to you through speaking to your dad, for example? Because I imagine when you were young, a lot of it didn't really make sense. And growing up, you kind of have memories of these things happening, like you talked about an exorcism type situation, but
Yeah.
you don't remember it and why and all of this completely because you were so young. So
Yeah,
what's that been like
that
for you?
tech isn't in my, it's not in my vocabulary, my knowledge when I'm a child. Like I think my extent of what I knew they believed in was, that everybody's a thetan,
Sure.
a spirit, whatever, soul, whatever you want to call it. Um, and then I knew that we had this reactive mind and it was going to cause me problems, and, that you had to work through these things in order to be a better person. So I already felt like there was something wrong with me from the start, like, because of that, which I think from what I've heard of people that get higher up into sort of OT7 kind of area, and it's very similar with cults as well. Like they believe that it's that paranoia of, all these body thetans, all these things that you need to get rid of. It's not uncommon in sort of cults, in the analysis of what a cult is, like making somebody paranoid of germs or sickness or things like that. It's the same thing in my head. I explained that really poorly, sorry, but
No, but it's true. But when you go through to this OT3 level in Scientology, you learn that your body, there are hundreds, if not thousands or millions of these body thetans attached to you in
yeah,
clusters that are hang up of this big intergalactic warlord Xenu
some of them are
dropping
on drugs. Might as well
H
say
bombs.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And then it goes up through the levels of they're on drugs and so. But the whole concept is these things are stuck to you, and it does create a lot of paranoia because you have to get rid of them. And a lot of people, Doug Kramer, for example, was saying, he's a good friend of mine, Dave's Been All Confused. If you haven't
Yes.
checked him out, go check him out. He was saying that it does lead to this kind of schizophrenia type mindset of and paranoia of like, I've got these things stuck to me and I've got to get rid of them, and it can send people into a place of being quite mad almost, and quite it's quite an upsetting thing to happen. And when you're that deep into it, the only cure in your mind is Scientology. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that that sort of thing happens.
Like I remember this very vividly. Like, I could put myself there and remember it. But you're like, did it happen? Like, did this really happen to me? Like, and I wanted to confirm it. And I asked my dad, I was like, look, I know it's hard to talk about. I know that it doesn't particularly paint you in a good light, but I am really struggling with some of these things that I remember, and I just want some validation that I've not made it up. And I asked him, I was like, did this happen? Did I have an exorcism? And he said, yes, you did. Like, we believed that you had this evil Thetan personality in you, and and Aaron said it was squirreling. I didn't know that it was squirreling, so
Yeah, 100%. Because I remember when you were telling me this the first time when we spoke on the phone, like,
yeah,
this is not a Scientology technique or principle or thing that you do. It's not a training routine. It's not something that's written down that you're supposed to do. And I remember when you first told me, I was like, it doesn't sound like Scientology.
yeah,
And I was racking my brain about what on earth is it they were trying to do. But it is true that I can see how they could think that this is the way to handle the situation, because the whole idea of confronting stuff with the TRs, that's
yeah,
a Scientology belief. So what they're trying to do is confront the problem. They've obviously done OT3, so they know about body thetans. So they're trying to get, I can see how they can think that this is the way to deal with this situation, but it's not a Scientology technique. But it doesn't surprise me at all that they've done it. And yeah, as Aaron said, it's total squirreling, because what they've done is they've taken Scientology and the belief and the kind of concept and the principles, and then they've gone about applying it in their own way that's not the way that the Church of Scientology teaches, right? And that's what
What's
they
true for
find
you is
squirreling.
true for you, no?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But what Scientology would say is they've gone one step further. It's not just it's true for you, it's true for you. And then they've gone and interpreted it
Yeah,
and applied it in a way that's non-standard, that's not correct. And that's what squirreling is. So they would have got in deep trouble if the church had ever known about this at the time,
yeah.
because it's, but it, you know, it doesn't surprise me. That's, I can totally see the thinking behind what they've done and why. But for those of you who are watching that don't know, for example, and didn't see the interview with Aaron, do you want to maybe give a quick explanation of what this is we're talking about, what this exorcism was?
Yes. So, I mean, it's not like the movie, you know, there was no like holy water or a priest yelling at me or anything
You
like
didn't
that.
run down the stairs backwards with your hand
No,
on your feet then, no? Okay.
no, I didn't. But so I had been sort of diagnosed with this evil suppressive person personality. And my parents basically thought that if they could get rid of this evil personality, you know, they believe Thetans can leave the body, you know, that kind of thing. They basically thought, right, if we use this tone 40 yelling, which is like, you know, the ultimate highest tone you can be, and it will work and do make anything happen, or however it is they see it. We're going to yell at this Thetan, and we are going to get it out of there so that a nice one can take its place, which in its basic form is an exorcism. So I remember this because it was very traumatic. I was only 6. I remember it's like one of my first memories, which is really sad. But I remember being like on my bed, being yelled at by my dad, and it went on for ages. It went on for absolute ages. I cried. You know, you had this big kind of blow up about it. I was very upset. You know, and then it was over. I don't think it worked. I'm the same person. But, you know, yeah, that was one of their attempts at handling me. And I always wonder, like, if I was a parent and I had this, you know, suppressive 6-year-old child, it's like, were they afraid of me? Did they like? It's a lot of power to give a 6-year-old as well. Like, what did they think I was going to be able to do? Do you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
know, my priority was, you know, putting on shows for my grandma and making things with paper, like,
Yeah.
you know,
But you have to put it into context in that in Scientology, suppressor people, SPs, are literally the enemy, right? And they are
yeah,
the root cause of all problems in life for anyone and everyone. And you're taught that SPs are like a virus, right? They spread, and their impact spreads, and they're really hard to get rid of and control. And SP's goal in life is not just to like get in your way, but they are actively trying to suppress you and stop you from progressing and achieving in life. That's what SPs do. And so I don't think Scientologists are taught to be scared of SPs, but you are taught to be very, very wary of them.
yeah,
And if you can at all avoid connection in any way with an SP, then do it, because it's not even worth going down that wormhole. However, if you're in a situation where you are with an SP, you're going to want to confront it, because you know, if you don't confront it, then the SP will have an effect on you. So in context, your parents would have, you know, they've got this belief that the SP are the devil, and suddenly for whatever reason they've decided or have been told that their child is an SP, they're going to want to do anything and everything they possibly can to try and cure you of this thing and try and
yeah,
change you so you're not an SP, because they don't want that of you. They don't want you to be an SP. It's bloody inconvenient for them and everyone around them that you're an SP. So
yeah,
they're going to try using everything they possibly can to try and handle you so that you're not this problem. But unfortunately, they don't, because when you're so far in, you don't realize that standing there shouting at your child, you might think of it as confronting the suppression and, telling the body thickness to go away, which is a really good thing. It's not a good thing because it has a longer term impact on you as a person, but you're not thinking that as a parent at the time. But unfortunately, that's the long term effects of it.
Yeah, and I think it's something as well, like, that has stuck with my mum in particular. Like, I've asked my dad, I'm like, you don't think I'm an SP now, though, right? Like, you know that that's a rubbish term and it doesn't mean anything. And he was like, yeah, like, I don't think that. My mum, on the other hand, though, like, she still believes I'm the cause of her problems, from her giving birth to me and ruining her life, as is what she said. Like, so that diagnosis, or is it called a diagnosis in Scientology? Whatever,
I suppose
you
that's the
know,
word you can use for it. Yeah.
yeah, like that, I believe has stuck with her throughout her life,
Mm.
and I still think she would say, like, yeah, she's the cause of my problems for sure, even though she hadn't spoke to me for gone, like, we're on 12 years now, like,
But
you
your
know.
parents are out of Scientology, like they're not Scientologists anymore. Do they consider themselves independent Scientologists studying outside of the church, or are they completely both out entirely?
Yeah, well, I couldn't tell you on my mum's side. I actually don't know what she's doing at all. She's been out for ages, but who knows? Her dad was still in it, I believe, when we had left. So, there's always a chance she's gone back. Who knows? I hope
Yeah.
not, though. But my dad is not in it. He doesn't practice it. Those books were gone. He got rid of everything, as far as I'm aware. And he basically just was like, I've been conned, I've been lied to about all of this. So no, I don't think they're practicing. And coming out of it, I think was really hard for them. They're kind of overwhelmed with the internet and stuff, and even connecting with the whole X community. Like, everyone's awesome and really, like, fighting the fight, which I love to see it. I found it quite nice seeing everybody chatting and stuff, and everyone seems quite supportive of each other, which is lovely. But I think they found it quite overwhelming. But I think ultimately it's been for the best for him. While we were in Scientology, I've got extended family that are not Scientologists. My dad's side, the side I know a bit better.
This is
But
great. Your segue. This is the exact thing I was about to ask you about. So you've done the segue for me. So well done.
you just
Keep on
ruined
going.
it, though.
Carry on. What you're saying.
So, yeah, whilst we were in Scientology, I've had my extended family that are all not Scientologists. Now, my grandma, sadly, she is not with us anymore, but she had come to flag with us once. She had been tried to, they persuaded her to try and do a course. She is a bit like me, and will say what she thinks. She was like, sounds like a load of rubbish to me, and told him that it was not the vibe. And she used to tell me about it all the time, that she, enjoyed very much telling them that she thought it was a load of nonsense. But I had spent time with them when I was very small. As I got a bit older, that sort of period of time between I was 7 until they left, we weren't in contact with them because they were non-Scientologists. They, didn't believe in what my parents believed. I'm not sure if the church told them they should distance themselves or if they took it upon themselves to do that. But we didn't see them, and I don't know them very well because of that. Because we were sort of disconnected from them in that way. And they view people that are not Scientologists as sort of like lesser people. as far as I'm aware. You know, I had friends obviously at schools that weren't Scientologists, and they hated them a lot. My parents did, that is, they were like, these people are going to be bad influences on you. You know, they're going to make you do things that are in theta. They're making you, you know, be naughty or question things, like that kind of thing. So I wouldn't be allowed to go to like their houses or have them come to my house, you know. So I felt quite isolated like that. And I wasn't like the other kids. And a few of them, once I posted the series, some kids from when I was younger I have on Facebook and stuff, they were like, I always wanted to ask you about what was going on in your family. Like, because, you know, they just found it so strange that there was this disconnection thing. And not the policy, but like the distance between how much time I could spend with them.
I was going to jump in and talk about the disconnection thing actually with your grandparents, because what it sounds like to me was that they weren't 100% you know, happy with your parents being in Scientology. And as much as they may not have been declared suppressive people or going against Scientology or anti-Scientology, they're not exactly raving supporters of their children doing that. And so naturally any Scientologist is going to sort of drift away from that person, because you in Scientology are taught to believe that if someone is potentially going to be a problem or get in the way, then it's better to handle it so that then you can do your thing and go up the bridge and without that problem being there. So your parents probably wouldn't have formally disconnected from them, but would have kind of distance themselves a little bit so that they can, you know, continue in Scientology without having their parents on the phone in their ear all the time saying, you know, bugging them about it not being the best thing to do. And that's something that is experienced quite a lot. It's not formal disconnection, but it is a distancing. So it doesn't surprise me that that's something that happened. Is that something that you have managed to repair and go back to? You know, your grandparents still with us? Have you been able to reconnect with them after leaving, or is that not something that's been possible?
So I always had quite a good connection with my grandma. I loved her so much. She has passed away, unfortunately, in 2021. She's an absolute legend. I loved her so much. And she would look after me when I was quite little. And I remember that her job was, she was actually a sort of nurse. So she was a carer for people that were struggling with, you know, that had disabilities, physical or mental or otherwise. And she was a really, really good nurse, caring person. And she would kind of bring the people she was caring for out with her, take them on a day out and stuff. So I met a few of these people, and I learned something about Scientology that, you know, was crazy. And it was that these people with these disabilities, according to Scientologists, are seen as like degraded beings, and that you should stay away from them because they're gonna bring your tone down, and, you know, this kind of thing. And I remember my mum kicking off about it, that my nan was doing this job, bringing patients of hers around and stuff like that. So I think that pushed things further away as well. And I, even at that age, I thought that was quite vile that she would say that about somebody, especially I'd met a bunch of these people too, and they were really nice. Like, you know, yes, they have some problems, but, you know, don't we all? Like, they needed extra care, and they shouldn't have been talked of so badly. And disgusting, telling someone they're a degraded being in any context is just vile. And I always hated that. So after I had sort of moved out, my dad started to get in contact with the extended family. They're all on his side, his sisters, his mum and dad and stuff. So but at first he had kind of lied to them. He told them that I was in a dorm room with my friends at university, when I was actually in a bed sit with no front door lock and people doing drugs on the roof. Like, it was wild. And we still struggle because I struggle to see him and be a part of all of that as well. So we're not out of contact, we're working on it and stuff. It's just hard, I guess, because I feel like I don't really know them that well. Some of that stuff that's happened, we don't really talk about it. It's, I've had I'll never understand what you've been through. But it's difficult to kind of move forward with that. But time is a healer, and we hope that things can improve in the future. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you have got contact with him and can kind of, that's the first step, isn't it? Is reaching out, and you can contact each other. You've spoken about it, and that's the first step, isn't it? Recovery, and like you say, time is such an important healer.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on a little bit what you said a second ago about the ego thing with Scientologists and with disabled, like disabilities and things. With the ego side of things, in Scientology, you believe that Scientology is such an important mission. It's the biggest and most important thing you can do in life, right? It's this mission that's going to help humanity, right? So therefore, you're on this mission, and it's a really important mission. You are important because you're doing this important mission. And so it's this culture that feeds this ego thing where you look at non-Scientologists as therefore less important than you, because you feel like, well, you're on board or you're not, right? You're either doing this or you're not. And if you're not doing it, well then, fuck you, almost, is the mindset in your head, because you're like, if you're not going to jump on board and see that this is the best thing to do for humankind, then I don't care about you. Get out my way, because I'm on a mission here. Excuse me. So that's the mindset of someone that's in Scientology, and specifically in the Sea Org as well, because you've dedicated your life to this thing.
Yeah.
Even people in Scientology that aren't in the Sea Org are seen in your head as lower down, because you're like, cool, I get you're just a public and you're practicing Scientology, but if you really wanted to help people, if you really were dedicated to the cause, you would join the Sea Org as well. So why haven't you joined the Sea Org? That's the recruitment tactic they use. It's this guilt trip and shaming that's done. But there's that ego thing anyway, of anyone that's in Scientology is on this important mission and therefore more important. But when it comes to things like disabilities, it's even more prevalent, because as much as a Scientologist, if you were to walk into a church of Scientology tomorrow and ask them, they're not going to publicly say this, but it is the belief. Because in Scientology, if you believe you're a spiritual being with more ability, control, and power than you can ever imagine, you choose a body. Well, for a Thetan to choose a body that has got some sort of disability means that Thetan must be excuse me, that Thetan must be interpolated to some extent, right? Thetan, that spiritual being has chosen a body with a disability. Well, why? Like, why would you, as a spiritual being, choose a body that has a disability, right? So therefore, there's something wrong with that Thetan. Therefore, they're a suppressive person or whatever. So that is how they look at people with disabilities, because if you are a spiritual being at cause, you wouldn't choose a body with an issue like that. And that's the mindset of Scientologists. So therefore, that's probably why you were told to maybe keep your distance from people like that, because you believe that they must be interpolated or they must be suppressive or something's wrong with them on a spiritual level, because they've chosen a body that has this problem, which is a horrible way of thinking, but that is the matter of fact.
It's absolutely wild. I don't even know what to say. Like, it's just awful that that you can think that way of someone else. Like,
and it almost comes from a place of sympathy, which is another weird thing to get your head around, right? It's not like Scientologists are sat there thinking, oh, we need to treat all disabled people like they're horrible human beings and, you know, they don't deserve respect or anything like that. Actually, most Scientologists will be sat there thinking, God, I feel really bad. Like, how horrible is that, that spiritual being has chosen a body that's, you know, disabled in some way? Isn't it horrible that we live in a state of affairs that a spiritual being can think that that's the right decision to make? Like, actually, it fuels you to want to do Scientology even more because you want to get the planet to a place where where spiritual beings don't make those decisions. So it's not like they're sat there thinking, oh, you're a disabled person, you need to be treated differently. Actually, they're kind of sorry for the spiritual being for making that choice, which is just even more insane in your head,
I just
right?
can't, Alex, honestly, I cannot, I don't even understand how anyone can think like that. I think it's absolutely wild. It's just vile. Ugh. No.
That's the thing, that when you're indoctrinated in Scientology and you spend hours and hours, days and days, and weeks on weeks receiving Scientology counseling, working for the church, you become indoctrinated, right? And you get this warped sense of reality where you suddenly believe that this is the answer, this is the cure, and this is 100%. You know, in Scientology, there's the belief that if you apply Scientology correctly 100% of the time, it will work 100% of the time. So
Mm,
there's no question in your mind that what you're studying and learning isn't correct, right?
yeah.
So it's really easy once you're in to have that mindset. And the hard thing is that recovery once you leave of unpicking that. And like you say, recognizing different things in your recovery process, like the dictionary thing, yawning, and, you know, finding out definitions of words. Those are small little things that you can recognize in yourself in the recovery that helps you realize more about yourself, right? And that sort of thing. But wild.
Mind blowing, honestly.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Just,
It's crazy, but I think, you know, you're doing the right thing in speaking out about your experiences. And I think, you know, with what I'm doing with my channel, as you know, is sharing more UK stories. And I think the more people hear of what's going on in the UK, the better, right?
yeah.
You've demonstrated in this conversation that these abuses and this horrible treatment of children and things like this isn't something that just happens in the States. It happens here in the UK as well.
Mhm.
So thank you for coming and sharing that story. I wanted to ask you about uh, your channel and what you're doing with it, because you've done your 6-part series, right?
Yes.
Do you have any plans for doing more stuff? Like, do you want to start speaking out more? I know you're at the very beginning of the journey of sort of sharing your story, but what's your objective? Where are you going with it now?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I have obviously shared what I've shared, and I am happy with that. I will say that I don't have the goal to become like a Scientology focused channel. At the end of the day, this is trauma for me. Like, I don't want to spend my life doing that and talking through trauma for my whole life. I think it's important to do it right now. And as long as there's a call for it, I will be there. There are a couple of things I would like to tackle that I did not tackle in my series. So there may be a few more Scientology videos that will cover some of those topics. The most important thing is I do want to come back. A few people have been messaging me like, where are you? Like, because they've seen I've done this a year ago and not done anything since. But I didn't really know where to go after it. Like, I just took a break, which I think was a good thing for me. At the end of the day, my well-being is important to me. So I did that for that reason. I built a lot of Lego. You can see it all behind me. But yeah, I do intend to come back. There will be more sort of deep dives and research report type content on there. So please be patient with me, but I will be making a return to YouTube. So yeah.
Nice. That's like a little exclusive. I like that. How exciting. What great news. Where can people find you, Kelly, on YouTube?
You
Is
can
it just Kelly
find
Copter?
me. Yes, you can find me under the Kelli Copter. I provide in-flight entertainment. Yeah, I can't tell you exactly where we're going, but the journey's going to be fun.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you. Okay. All right. And one last question. I always like to end my interviews with this, and I didn't prepare you for it. So it's a little bit of a curveball. But I want to get into the habit of asking all my guests this as a kind of departing question.
All right.
If L. Ron Hubbard was to come back for one day, he was sat there right in front of you right now, what would you say to him?
Oh, good question. Honestly, I don't even know. I think I would tell him to shut up. I think that's what I'd tell him. I'd tell him to shut up because what on earth are you talking about, mate? Like, I'm sure if he was online today, you know, if he was, let's say, had his own YouTube channel, he would get cancelled so quick. Like, Twitter would have none of it. So, yeah, I don't even think I'd need to say a word to him. I think the internet would take him down.
You just sit there and look at him and just shake your head, just in
Yeah.
shame. Kelli Copter, thank you so much for coming on my channel and taking the time to speak to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it loads. And yeah, I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video and interview interesting and insightful. Kelli's story is certainly one to take away and think about. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. The engagement really helps with the growth of the channel. If you want to support financially, you can do that with the link below, and you can buy me a coffee or join a membership for the channel here on YouTube. But otherwise, thank you so much, and I will see you guys very soon.